What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Before we dive into the NFL topics of the week, we also want to talk about, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate it. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, follow the FFSN NFL feed, subscribe, follow. If you want to give us a rating and a comment, that would be fantastic, but it's not necessary. We don't want you to miss anything like this show, the coach's call sheet from Coach Smith. We have some other stuff on that feed as well. With that out of the way, Coach, how's it going? How was your weekend?
It's going great, Jeff. I was just thinking about you. I was just driving home.
Oh boy!
And I drove past the little municipal golf course here in town. It's just a little par 3 thing. And as I was driving along the road, there's one hole that's right along the road. The car in front of me, somebody up on the tee managed, it's par 3, mind you, managed to shank one so badly that it landed in the road like 10 feet in front of the car in front of me. And I thought Jeff Hartman would not hit a shot like that.
I hope I wouldn't. I really hope I wouldn't. My brother, who lives in Richmond, Virginia, he lives in near a course where it's similar to that. And you see golf balls bouncing on that major road all the time. Like, maybe y'all should just find a new hobby.
They even have a net that tries to keep them. So that guy managed to clear the net. That's an impressive.
Oh my gosh, that is impressive. That is impressive. But we're not here to talk about golf. We're here to talk about the National Football League. There's been a lot of news as it pertains to the NFL. We're going to talk about all that. 5 topics, 1 player profile, like we do every single episode. Let's start off, and I'm curious to see what you think about this. The Detroit Lions were in the news for all the wrong reasons, and that had pertained to they were caught in what the NFL said was a violation of OTA practice, organized team activities. Not only is it voluntary, it is a non-contact event. So you're not supposed to have any hitting or live hitting. Typically, they held, according to the report, 11-on-11 sessions during phase 2 of OTAs, and those sessions are not permitted until phase 3. What's your take on this? Does the punishment fit the crime? Is there anything about this that, as a coach, makes you say, yeah, you can't do that, or is this a non-issue?
I think this is kind of interesting. Listening to Dan Campbell's explanation of what the Lions were planning to do, they had 10 OTA practices. He said he scheduled 9 of them, with the 10th day as basically like a lifting / recovery session where guys would have access to the trainers, massage, cold therapy. It sounded like basically what he was saying was this: we're going to go really hard for 9 days. And on day 10 that we're allowed to have them there, we're going to make sure that they get the proper treatment that they need to help their bodies heal. And hey, if they take away that 10th day from us on the field, so be it, because we've kind of planned for it by being pretty intense. Now, I don't know if that's exactly how it all went down, but it almost feels as though the Lions found a little bit of a loophole and said, hey, find us if you want, because we're kind of planning on it. So I think that's a really interesting move by Dan Campbell there. Maybe it's over the line, though.
Well, he's going to run into a problem. And the problem is not the NFL. It's the Players Association. The players are the ones that don't want these practices. They don't want the physicality. They don't want the injuries. So I feel like Dan Campbell might say, yeah, we pulled one over on the NFL. But ultimately, I'd also say to Dan Campbell, your players might be pissed that you're going this hard in phase 2 of OTAs. Therefore, the Players Association comes in and says the collective bargaining agreement says this. And what's going to happen is the NFL is going to have to respond with harsher penalties. We have yet to see what the tampering allegations against it's Atlanta. And I'm trying to think the other team. Coach, can you think of it, that's being accused of tampering this past offseason? I know Atlanta's one of them with Kirk Cousins, but we'll see. That there's talk that they could lose a draft pick. Will something like OTAs and having 2 physical practices, is that the next step for this eventually, and not just finding them money or saying you're going to be docked an OTA?
I think if it feels like an escalating scale, that if it happens again, then absolutely the punishment will escalate. It's interesting that they were turned in by an NFLPA rep who was at their practice. It feels like a little bit of I'm not sure what the adjective I'm searching for here, but on Dan Campbell's part, to know there's an NFLPA rep there and to still say, hey, we're going to go 11-on-11, even though it clearly states we can't do that right now. I don't know, is that hubris, arrogance, not caring? Like I said, I
Yeah.
don't care if we get fined because we've planned for this in our schedule.
I mean, this is a situation where, again, the Players Association, the rep has to be sitting there and be like, guys, what the hell are we doing? We're
Yeah.
fighting for these practices to be non-contact, really light until you get to phase 3. And even then, you're not wearing shells. You might just be wearing helmets and nothing else. Like, the Players Association, and you are a teacher and I was an educator, which is a union. That's a union job. And so you talk about negotiations between the Board of Education and the teachers union. The teachers union is going to have to represent all of their constituents. And in that case, it's teachers. In this case, it's the NFL players. They have to be pulling their hair out at this, saying, guys, well, you guys have to stand up for yourselves, and we're going to have to stand up for you. And that might mean that your team gets docked something. In this case, it's an OTA practice, but still, I see this as a much larger issue because you have coaches like Dan Campbell, and these coaches have been around forever. Back in Chuck Noll's days with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got fined a draft pick, I believe, for practicing with pads on when they shouldn't have. But it's just, I feel like this is a microcosm of a bigger issue. The NFL, the NFLPA, players saying that they want less and less, and then they're going out and doing this. It just doesn't mesh. I don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Campbell has been called a throwback guy as a compliment, but there have been a couple instances now where the throwback mentality has kind of hurt him a little bit. You think back to the NFC Championship game and just a little bit of stubbornness about his approach on fourth down, strategically speaking, in the second half of that game. We're going to go for it. We go for it. That's what we do. That's that old school mentality. But it came around to bite to hurt them, and this is him running into that same problem.
And this is also, a shot across the bow of the 31 other teams in the National Football League saying, look, we are paying attention. If y'all mess up, you're gonna be docked something. And so we'll see how that goes moving forward. Nonetheless, let's go to the second topic. Mandatory minicamps have either begun or are about to begin for a lot of teams in the NFL. In the NFC South, all 4 teams have new offensive coordinators. Minicamp will be especially important for the teams in that division to get their new offenses on track and off to the around the right foot. If you're an offensive coordinator, which team in the South would you most want to take over? So would it be the Falcons, the Buccaneers, the Saints, the Panthers? Which one out of those 4 would you want to run, Coach?
Yeah, I think if I were an offensive coordinator at that level and you gave me my pick, Atlanta's the most intriguing, the talent that they have there with Kirk Cousins. He's probably now the best quarterback in the division. They've got some really good skill guys, Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London. That's a good young nucleus to build around. They've got a top 12 offensive line per the PFF rankings, whatever stock you put in that. So it feels like there's a lot to work with in Atlanta. And as Steeler fans, we're saying to ourselves, oh, well, the guy who got deposed there is now in Pittsburgh. Shouldn't that worry Steelers fans? Well, the asterisk, of course, is the quarterback. Atlanta had a terrible quarterback situation for most of Arthur Smith's time there, and bringing in Kirk Cousins is going to do wonders, most likely, for that offense. So I think they're the intriguing one. They're the one I would choose.
I probably agree with the Falcons offensively. I am, though, intrigued by the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield coming back to Tampa Bay. It's his second year there in that system, whatever system they're putting in, but with the team. You have Mike Evans sign that big contract. He's going to be there. He wants to stay there. And what are the other pieces of the puzzle? I know they invested in the offensive line this past offseason. They took, oh my gosh, it's crazy how the names escape you. The Duke tackle / center that Steelers were interested in.
Graham Barton, yeah.
There you go. They took Graham Barton in round 1, so they're investing in that. I think that could be a decent team this year. The one that really makes me scratch my head, though, is New Orleans. I don't know what to make of New Orleans. I don't know with Carr at quarterback. Is he that guy? They took a 5th-round flyer on Spencer Rattler, which no one's really expecting much there. What do you think about the other teams that aren't Atlanta in the NFC South?
So New Orleans brought in Clint Kubiak, who's a guy that I think a lot of teams had their eye on. Great family tree there. Mm-hmm. Father Gary Kubiak, and they've been big names in the offensive football world for a long, long time. Be very interesting to see if he can get the best out of Derek Carr, because Derek Carr's always felt like a guy that had a lot of talent and was kind of like right on the edge of being maybe an elite quarterback or a top 10 guy, but was never able to really kind of get over the top. A lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of big turnovers at bad times, mistakes that he would make. And so if Kubiak can harness what's left of Derek Carr's prime and get him to play his best football, then yes, that's an intriguing spot. Carolina, I think that's a tough sell for any offensive coordinator. What do they have in Bryce Young? What are his strengths? That's going to be important to discover. They traded away a lot of assets. They don't have the ability to remake them. Now they traded for Deontay Johnson. That's a nice get for them. And then they drafted the Leggett kid out of South Carolina. So, I mean, I think they're a lot better at wide receiver than they were, but they don't have a ton of playmakers, and they don't have a great offensive line, and they got an unknown at quarterback. That just feels like a tough situation to build around because you don't know what you're building just yet.
It is funny how you brought up the Carolina Panthers, because I didn't bring them up because I don't believe necessarily that Bryce Young is that guy. Not just the number one overall pick. I don't know how much success he'll have in the NFL. We've seen someone else named Kyler Murray. We'll talk about him in a second here, with this kind of more diminutive in stature. Do you think that Bryce Young is going to be capable of being a solid NFL starter for years to come?
Bryce Young worries me simply because you combine that diminutive stature with the fact that he's not that thickly built. Kyler Murray's a smaller quarterback, but he's also much thicker, much better equipped to take hits, a lot quicker too. His open field running ability allows him to avoid a lot of big hits too.
Yeah.
So you get him out of the pocket, you're not as nervous. You get Bryce Young out of the pocket, and you think to yourself, man, go down. Like find a spot to land before you get massacred. And then you put him in an offense where the offensive line was a mess last year. I just feel like it's a really tough read on Bryce Young right now. What is the system that will allow him to be the most successful? Well, hey, he had a ton of success at Alabama. Yeah, but Alabama was overwhelmingly more talented than almost everybody they played. And now he's in the opposite situation where Carolina is undermanned compared to just about everybody else in the league. So how do you evaluate Bryce Young? That's a tough one, and that's going to be a difficult job. I can't remember who the new OC is in Carolina, but that's going to be a difficult job.
Well, let me ask you this to wrap up this talking point. Last season, there was no questions that the NFC South was the worst division in the NFL, not just NFC, in the entire National Football League. Do you think they'll be the worst again in 2024?
Yes, I do. I think that the AFC South, which was another one of the weaker divisions in football, has improved. I think that Indianapolis is on track to be a better football team. I think Jacksonville's got a solid core, and the Texans could make a run at the AFC title next year. I mean, given the season they had last year, and then boy, they really had a great offseason talent-wise. And there's nobody that you can make. I don't think you can say that seriously about any team in the NFC South right now. So I do believe they're the weakest. And maybe that helps you as an OC in that you're not going to be playing elite teams week in and week out like in some other divisions.
Right.
That's the silver lining.
All right, let's go to our third topic. Out in Arizona, we talked about Kyler Murray just there, talking about the NFC South comparing to Bryce Young. Kyler Murray's going to get his first chance to have practice reps with wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. In 3 of the past 4 seasons, a rookie receiver has eclipsed 1,400 yards. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, all reaching that mark. If you were betting the over-under on Harrison to join that 1,400 rookie club, would you take the over or the under?
From a talent standpoint, he's capable. Whether or not he can do it in Arizona is the big question, and leads me to say I got to take the under on that one. 1,400 is a big number. And it is really a statement about where we are in the passing game these days, that you never in the history of the league had a rookie get to 1,400 yards. And then now we've had it 3 out of the last 4 seasons. And so the odds kind of tell us that, hey, there's going to be a guy this year that'll do it. Will it be Harrison in Arizona? Maybe Malik Neighbors. Who was the other big Roma Dunze, right? I mean, you got some really good top 10 wide receivers in that rookie class. I think Harrison benefits from the following. Kyler Murray loves to target like one main guy. He's got a go-to guy. If you look at like the targets in Arizona over the last 3 years where Kyler Murray's been the starter, the number one guy gets the overwhelming bulk of the targets, and then it's a big drop-off. So he seems to have a go-to guy. If he can develop that relationship with Marvin Harrison, like maybe he had with DeAndre Hopkins a couple years ago, then I feel as though he's got a shot. He's got to stay healthy. Obviously, he's a talented guy. Tough division, though. You're going to play, San Francisco's going to figure out ways to take him out of his game. The Rams defense is improving. Seattle's always got a good defense. 6 times a year, he's going to face schemes where the defense is really going to gear up for you. And I think that's going to make it pretty difficult to reach that number. I'd take the under.
So it's interesting because you have to ask yourself, again, Arizona, the offense itself, is that going to be able to generate that much receiving output for any wide receiver? But when you look at the depth chart for the Arizona Cardinals at wide receiver, Marvin Harrison's already basically wide receiver 1, Michael Wilson, wide receiver 2, Zay Jones, wide receiver 3, tight end Trey McBride. That's not really a who's who of receivers. So you talked about Kyler Murray giving all of his attention to one guy. If I were to say pick one of that list that I just read off, who are you picking?
That's the guy.
You're picking Marvin Harrison. So 1,400 yards. I'm going to go under. I think Marvin Harrison leads the Cardinals in receiving, but I don't think he eclipses 1,400. I don't think they move the ball well enough. I'm not sold on that team and him as a quarterback, the ability to stay healthy. I'm going to take the under as well. What do you think? Do you think he eclipses 1,000 but doesn't get to 1,400?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, provided he stays healthy, obviously.
Yeah.
I almost say this jokingly, but I'm being serious. It probably works in his favor that Arizona is not going to be very good, and they're going to be in situations a lot where they're behind and have to throw the ball, as opposed to, hey, we're winning a lot of games in the second half and we're going to pound the rock and take the ball out of the air. I mean, that from a statistical standpoint, that probably benefits him. I think he gets over 1,000. A couple years ago, the leading rookie receiver had around 1,100, and I think he probably winds up in that area.
Okay. I think George Pickens he went over 1,000 his rookie year. I think he was close to 1,200 yards. That might be where he ends up as well. So we'll see where it goes. Let's go to our next topic. An interesting article from the weekend, over the weekend from The Athletic, discussed the officiating crisis in the NFL. In particular, they examined how manpower shortages at the lower levels of football are impacting the league and why it's so difficult to attract qualified officials. What are your thoughts on what the league can do to remedy this crisis and improve its officiating situation? I'm intrigued by this. I rail on the officials all season. What's your take, Coach?
So it's really interesting because the article kind of made the argument that one of the biggest problems the league has is the lack of a bureaucratic structure within the officiating ranks. There's not really a hierarchy or a tier of administrators to sort of run the show. Throw in the fact that it's not a year-round job. They're probably not paid as adequately as they should be in a multi-billion-dollar business like the NFL. And the fact, you also have to throw on top of it the fact that everybody hates officials. And that's just a hard job to attract people to. At the high school level here in the state of New Jersey, we have a real crisis because you had this core group of guys that have been doing it forever, and they're all retiring. And the younger officials, it's just getting harder and harder to attract young people to the job. Nobody wants to be yelled at constantly. It's not like there's a lot of glory in officiating. I was at an AAU basketball tournament this weekend where a parent had to be removed from the stands because she would not lay off. This one official was berating this official, And finally, the officials stopped the game and said, I'm not going to continue until this person is removed. And when she was removed, there was a cheer that went up through the rest of the auditorium. That stuff carries over. People aren't interested in getting involved in the profession. And the article that in the Athletic was essentially saying the NFL prioritized it better, had a better organizational and management structure, and compensated the officials properly to make it a more attractive profession. You would see the results on the field increase as well.
Let me give you my take on this. So this is news that also took place in the NFL. We just didn't have it as a talking point, is the fact that in this preseason, I do believe, they are going to mess with eliminating the chain gang. They're going to have the microchips in the footballs to be able to signify whether it's a first down or not a first down. And I've said this for, it feels like decades. It's $1 billion industry, and they're still using sticks and chains to measure a first down. When technology can tell you exactly how fast a runner ran on a breakaway run, we can't distinguish a first down with some other measuring tools other than two old guys holding sticks and chains. And so you have $1 billion industry now. Everyone would say, well, it's throwback. That's not throwback. That's antiquated. They need to get with the times. The NFL needs to say we have a problem. We have a crisis, as it was labeled in the talking point for this topic. And the crisis needs remedied by taking this more seriously. Let's bring technology in. That's step one. Let's get these guys full time. That's step two. Let's pay them good money, and then also pay them enough that maybe you can get some college officials that are younger. Maybe you can recruit some UFL officials, bring them into the system, have a system in place so that when you have the Ed Hockuleys of the world retire, you have a it's real smooth transition from one to the next. It should not be the way that it is. If they took themselves and the officiating more serious, there's no way they would ever look at this and the way that they handle officiating and say, I think it's good. They're ridiculed every single week, up and down. Every single person with a social media platform or anyone with a microphone in front of their face, including myself, they will berate officials. But I also see it as systemic and not an individual problem with that official. This isn't an Angel Hernandez in Major League Baseball, who is by far the worst of all. I think they just need to take it more serious. Pay them what they deserve. You are a $1 billion industry. Give these guys good pay, full-time, benefits, etc., and then you'll see people view it as an attractive job. Same thing for high school coach, and it's all high school sports, it's all youth athletics. If they paid these people, these individuals, more money, they'd probably be more willing to take the harassment and the berating of parents, because you know what? It's actually like a job. It's not just a labor of love. You're actually going out and making a decent amount of money for the work that you're putting in. That's just my 2 cents. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Compensation is king.
Yeah.
The state of New Jersey, this goes back a while, 25, 30 years. But the state of New Jersey was facing a teacher crisis, a shortage, as the cost of college tuition escalated. Less and less people wanted to go into teaching because it wasn't worth what they were paying for a college degree. And so the state of New Jersey began to create a new program. It was called the Governor's Teacher Scholarships. It went to high school students who had really good grades. And if they entered the teaching profession, the state would pay them bonuses, essentially, on top of whatever their district was paying them. And it's funny, the teacher shortage went away. People suddenly were like, hey, there's more money in the profession. It is incredible what an incentive money it can be. And in this instance, I think it's 100% correct that if you made it more worth their while, I think people would be willing to take the crap they get from fans if they were compensated properly, because they understand that that's kind of part of the deal. And some of the refs, some of the ones that I know, they like that part. They like the confrontation. They like the being the center of attention, even if the attention is negative. But a little more cash in their pocket would make it more worthwhile, for sure.
Oh, there's officials that love being the heel. They love being the bad guy, whether it's teeing up somebody. It's the way they handle it. I think honestly, I was actually approached to do lacrosse games when I stepped away from coaching. I said, no, I just need to get away from it. But still, it also wasn't beneficial from a cost perspective. The amount of time I would have to spend, whether it's travel, whether it's being there for 2 games, JV and varsity, etc. The NFL should have a much better system in place. And I think they start with compensation, then it trickles on down from there. All right, this will be a fun one. Number 5, this coming Sunday is Father's Day, which is also the US Open Golf Tournament. I'm sure you're aware of that. It's always on Father's Day weekend. So best wishes to all the dads out there who are listening. I know, Coach, you're a dad. I'm a dad. So happy Father's Day to you. What's the best football related memory you have of your father or of yourself as a father with your own children? I'll let you go first, Coach.
Well, I am a lifelong Pittsburgh Steelers fan. My father is a lifelong Cleveland Brown and now
Oh,
Baltimore Raven fan.
oh
And
my
my dad
God.
and I, yeah, I know, I'm not making this up. My dad and I could not watch football games together as a kid growing up. It was not doable. It was untenable. I was, a kid, emotional, right? The Browns would beat the Steelers, or the Steelers would beat the Browns, and we wouldn't talk to each other for a couple of days. It was funny how that worked. And I asked him one time. I said, you let me become a Steelers fan, and he was like, well, what was I going to do? Like, make you root for the Browns or root for whomever? And I was like, well, yeah, a lot of dads do that. A lot of dads do that. So I got a lot of respect of my dad for letting me choose. He did say, well, if I knew you were going to choose the Steelers, I would have maybe thought about it again. So within that, I don't have like a lot of specific memories like of sharing football with my dad. My best football memories are of my dad coming to my games when I played. He still comes to my games. As a coach, my father's been coming to football games, following me around for 40 some years, playing or coaching football, and he's there religiously. And it's a wonderful memory to be able to walk off the field after winning a game, give my dad a hug. I remember my first year, way back in 1996. I was a young assistant coach on our high school team. We won the state championship, and my father was as excited as I've ever seen him. He was more excited, I think, than we were, running off the field and giving my dad a big hug there. That was a great memory. So it's a little bit more on the personal level than it is
Yeah.
on the NFL level for me.
So yeah, mine is not so much personal level. It's my dad. I was just back home in my hometown, unfortunately for a funeral, but was around a lot of my family. We end up always talking about the Steelers. Where I grew up in West Virginia is basically a part of Western PA, and I have some great memories as a kid of going with my dad and our whole family when the Steelers were in the playoffs. We would go to one of his friends' house for the playoff game. And his friend, who was a coworker of his, had a kegerator in his garage, and that's where I learned how to pour a beer from a keg at like age 6 or 7 years old. As they sent my brother and I off to, and the fellow where we were at his house, his kids too. Hey, we need another beer, and so I have a lot of memories of that. And they used to yell and scream at the TV, some expletives. It was always really funny. My best memory with my dad, though, in terms of the Steelers, hands down, was a story. So in 2005, the divisional game, everyone knows it for this. If you're a Steelers fan, that's when the Steelers beat Peyton Manning and the Colts in Indianapolis, the Jerome Bettis fumble game. So we're supposed to watch this. My parents are in town. My brother used to live in Northern Virginia. We were going to go to his house to watch the game. Unfortunately, a snow event, his dish wasn't working. So we had to then call an audible, go to Shepherdstown, West Virginia, where we went to college at Shepherd University. And we went to this tiny little apartment where my fraternity brother, who was also a Steelers fan, had a gathering himself. So there's all these people in this tiny little apartment for this game, which is still to this day one of the most exciting games I've ever watched in my life. And the ebbs and flows of that game, the Joey Porter sack, the Troy Polamalu should have been interception that gets overturned. We won the game when they sacked Peyton Manning. Jerome Bettis fumbles. We think we're going to vomit, but we had tackled each other and in excitement. Like, grown men and just are running all over, hugging each other. And then we feel like we're going to puke when Jerome Bettis fumbles and Ben Roethlisberger has to make the tackle. Probably one of the greatest moments of being a Steelers fan. I was there with my family and my dad. We still talk about it. He has a terrible towel that only comes out during the playoffs, and he had that there, and he pulled it off too early, and that's why he fumbled. So we always blame that on my dad. But I have a lot of great stories like that. But I'm sure, for me, and I know as a Steeler fan, you remember that game, but still, that's probably it. And as a father, I know your kids aren't Steeler fans. My kids are. I let them choose it on their own. I did brainwash them a little as kids, but they just like, I don't have a lot of memories of them outside of just watching the games. And they're really starting to come around to watching and learning about the players. And they like to watch, and they love TJ Watt doing his big celebration, the leg kick and stuff. And it's just really fun. It's fun to then see the cycle continue. And I'm getting to experience some of these things with my kids. So, but your kids are not Steeler fans, correct?
They are not, man. My older son Jake is a Carolina Panthers fan. Oh, God. He had a good run. He had a good run when he was young. They were good.
That's true.
Cam Newton Panthers.
Yeah.
He had a big Luke Kuechly fat head on his wall. But he's suffering these days. And then my son Aiden now, man, he's living about as good as any Lions fan has lived in the last 50 years. So I guess it's all relative.
Well, at least your son went to training camp and he enjoyed it and he had a good time out there. Yeah. So
he wants to go back this year. So I'll cart him out with me.
Maybe he'll claim the Steelers as his AFC team and the Lions as his NFC team or something like that down the road. We'll see.
Yeah, cheesy. I'll take what I can get though.
All right. Player profile today. Darren Waller, who the tight end of once picked up by the Baltimore Ravens, probably has his most successful years with the Raiders, both in Los Angeles and Vegas, was most recently with the New York Giants, announced his retirement from football, steps away really early. I don't know if he's going into music. I hope not. I heard his last music video. I would just say no. But still, Coach, what's your take on Darren Waller, the player?
I did not know that about the music until you brought it up before the show. And I as well really hope that that's not going to be the case. That'll probably go about as well as Le'Veon Bell's rap career. But Darren Waller's 31 years old, and it shouldn't strike us as surprising, I guess, when a player hits 30, because that's really where the shelf life of an NFL player gets extremely old. But he just 2 years ago, he was signed to this big free agent contract, and it felt like the Giants were really getting a player, and they had Saquon Barkley, and there was optimism about Daniel Jones there. And it just sort of felt like, hey, man, the Giants are putting some pieces together. And here we are 2 years later, and Barkley's gone, and Jones might be on his last opportunity in New York, and Waller's now retired. It certainly didn't work out the way that the Giants planned it. I would like to think, though, that for Darren Waller, he's walking away at the right time, that he knows his body, that he knows, his heart and his mind, that he feels like, hey, this is the right time. He's probably still pretty healthy. Maybe he's got some other opportunities. I don't know. I'm sure he's got some money in his pocket. He obviously had that big contract signing just a couple of years ago, got a lot of bonus money. So hopefully at 31 years old, he's doing the right thing for Darren Waller. That's what you just have to hope for with these guys. You're playing the most physical sport on the planet. And more than anything else, when you get out, you want a little bit of money in your pocket and you want your health. And hopefully that's right for him then.
Yeah, you see it happen all the time. And I know a lot of people that are just casual citizens say, how could they walk away from the money and the fame and all that? You see players like Barry Sanders do it. Calvin Johnson's another one that did it, just happened to be two Lions nonetheless. It's a situation where I think sometimes players just, they might have loved the game at one time. Maybe they don't love it anymore. They want to go do something else and move on with their life's work, as Chuck Noll once said. And so Darren Waller, hey, good luck in retirement. And, hope you made the right decision. That's the only thing. Sometimes you hope that they step away for a year. They have massive amount of regret, and it's tough to get back into it. It's tough to get your body back in shape. It's tough to get back into the good graces of the National Football League and that sometimes good old boys club. And so Darren Waller, good luck. Good luck in retirement. There's our player profile. So, Coach, what's coming up on the call sheet this week? Anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, so I was talking about this on our Here We Go podcast with Brian Anthony Davis last night. It's interesting. I kind of stumbled across this statistic about Dan Marino that had me really intrigued. Most people know, Dan Marino's one of the all-time greats at quarterback. When he retired in 1999, he was the NFL's all-time leader in touchdown passes and passing yardage. And, those numbers have since been eclipsed, but he's still in the top 10 in both categories. And then as I was looking at his career numbers, Dan Marino's career completion percentage was 59.4%, which if you ranked him in 2023 in terms of completion percentage at 59.4, that would have been 50th in the league among qualified quarterbacks. 50th. And I started to think to myself, man, that is a real interesting reflection of how the nature of the passing game has changed over the last 25 years. So that's going to be our call sheet this week. We're going to take a deep dive on the evolution of the passing game over the last 25 years from Marino to the present. How has it changed? And we'll highlight those things.
That'll be a good one. I look forward to hearing it, Coach. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, at Coach's Call Sheet. That's really the hub for everything that I'm doing. And then at KT Smith FFSN on Twitter as well.
And they should be on the lookout for some new Instagram stuff that you're doing that will also to be on X and Twitter. So keep your eye out for that. We're looking forward to debuting some new Coach's Call Sheet stuff. So be on the lookout for that. When is that starting, Coach? Do you know?
Yeah, so we're going to have a new feature debuting this week called Gridiron Glossary, where we take a football term and we'll scheme it up for you, and then we'll do a little video clip of it. We'll kind of have a definition of the term. We want it to read almost like a dictionary with the diagrams and the videos that go with it. Short clips, less than a minute. Hopefully, people can watch them and learn some football.
So like one of them would be like getting trucked. Definition: noun. See Jerome Bettis, Brian Urlacher, 2005. All right, I love it.
That's a great example, actually. Yes, perfect.
All right, that does it for an NFL Whip Around. Coach, thanks as always for your time. You can check me out on our Steelers coverage at the Steel Curtain Network. And also, if you want to check me out on X or Twitter, at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. Until next week, take it easy.